There we go.
What did we want?
Yeah.
Right. Because I thought we had that window up earlier.
Oh yeah. So that could be so. Yeah. So that's, you've got one of these. All right. We'll get this right. We'll get this right. Okay.
This is not acceptable.
Does that mean he just might want to talk?
Definitely.
Do we do that?
I need to get your phone number so I can have you on my. We need to exchange phone numbers. I don't have time right now to do it, but I'll do it before.
Hello.
Can you hear us, Ross?
Yes, I can.
We're connected. Hey, Ross, can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely. Apparently you can't hear me.
Was that him? Did you hear him?
I couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
Turn up the volume a little bit. We tried to connect with video and it was not accepted, so I called back with audio and accepted. Hey, Ross, do you want us to call you back with video? I can't hear him.
I can't hear anything. Can you?
Sure.
Oh, now I heard him.
Okay, call you right back.
Okay.
Okay, I guess we can turn him down now, huh?
Here we go.
Hello.
All right, I'd like to call the regular meeting to order, and I have asked Ms. Barbara Phillips to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America.
Hey, welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to be back with all of you. And before we talk about that, we'll talk about that at the end. But Director Hardy is joining us on Skype tonight. And we'll just go into the protocols. This is the meeting of the board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. We allow opportunity for public comments later in the agenda. If you would like to address the board, please fill out the blue card, or the white card with the blue border. And if you would bring it to the dais for us. If you'd like to address the board, if you'd like to speak to an agenda item, please indicate on the card and your name will be called at that portion of the agenda. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Let's see. Dr. Watts, are there any changes to our agenda?
Yes, President Venkatasalam, and welcome back. Members of the board, Ms. Halley, 3 resolutions have been added to tonight's agenda for approval. Resolution number 1534, Reduced Educational Program. Resolution number 1535, Capital Improvements and Technology Levy. and Resolution number 1536, Replacement Educational Programs and Operations Levy. In addition, the minutes of the February 13th, 2018 special meeting were added to the consent agenda.
All right, thank you. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the changes to the agenda, please.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any questions or discussions?
So the two of the three that you said are actually not on the section 4, is that right? Am I reading that right?
No, all three.
One is in discussion.
So
The
looking consent.
1534 is there.
It's 4.
5.03, 5.04.
Down lower,
Consent
okay.
agenda, yes.
Consent, okay. There we are, I wasn't looking that far.
All right. I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Okay, motion passes. Next up is recognition, and it is the proclamation for National Black History Month. I will read the proclamation, and community member Ms. Barbara Phillips will accept the proclamation. Okay, National Black History Month. Whereas when he founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, now the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, on September 9, 1915, Dr. Carter G. Woodson labored under the belief that historical truth would crush falsehood and usher in a new era of equality, opportunity, and racial democracy, and it has been its charge for over a century. And whereas in 1926, Dr. Woodson initiated the celebration of Negro History Week to bring attention to his mission to promote the study of Black history and help school systems coordinate their focus on the topic. And whereas in 1976, the celebration of Black History Month was decreed a national observance and expanded to include the entire month of February. And whereas today Black History Month is supported and celebrated throughout the history by people of all ethnic and social backgrounds, and whereas for more than a century, African American life, history, and culture have become major forces in the United States and the world, and whereas confident that their struggles mattered in human history, Black scholars, artists, athletes, and leaders self-consciously used their talents to change how the world viewed African Americans. And whereas in honor of this milestone, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History has selected African Americans in Times of War as the 2018 National Black History theme, which focuses on the specific and unique issues faced by African Americans in times of war. And whereas the Kent School District's commitment to equity and excellence for each and every student is grounded in the rich legacy, courage, and remarkable contributions of those who sacrificed to keep their dreams alive for generations to come and build a nation that is more just and more equal for all people. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaims the month of February 2018 National Black History Month in Kent School District and urges all citizens to join in this observance. Okay, Ms. Phillips. Shall we?
Well, thank you. And I would just like to acknowledge the Kent School District and the work it's doing towards equity and hoping that we all can cherish and learn from each other as we continue this work. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, next up is our presentations, and we are going to discuss the formative assessment student performance update with Dr. Joel Harmon, and Dr. Andrea Melt, Assessment Application Analyst, will present and will be available for questions.
Good evening, President Vengadaslam. It's good to have you back. Members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Howley. I'm pleased to share the podium and space with Dr. Andrea Meld. She's an assessment applications analyst in the testing and assessment department and is instrumental in helping with administration of iReady and is here to discuss those results with you. And I'll be here to help support and answer questions as needed.
Hey, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm going to present the data tonight in terms of 3 questions or ways to look at the data. So overall, how did KSD students perform in reading and math at mid-year? How much growth was there from fall 2017 to mid-year? The second question is, how do our schools compare with each other in terms of mid-year scores and growth? We're also comparing them to national iReady results. And the final question for tonight is, how do demographic groups compare in terms of mid-year scores and growth? It's not. Well, little technical glitch there. Okay, so we should be on the second slide now. Okay, so you see a number of vertical bars. The green bars are the fall results. The blue bars are the winter results. And we're talking about math. So in our district, we use iReady for K through 8 for math. You'll also notice that the bars differ in shade. There's like a light green and a dark green and a light blue and a dark blue. The lighter colors indicate where you want students to be at the beginning of the school year. The darker bars are where we want kids to be mid-year. And these have instructional implications. Your students who are still performing at early of the year standards should have more support and get more instruction on grade level. The students who are the darker bars are already pretty well along for their grade level, and they can do better with more advanced levels. Now, if you look across the grade levels, let's see if I get my pointer to work here. Look, whoops. We had some, there we go. Okay. If you look across the top of the grade levels, you'll notice that in kindergarten, there is huge growth. Second and third and first, sort of moderate growth. Fourth, fifth, and sixth, you had tremendous growth. So some good things are happening there. And you're starting to see kind of a flattening of growth or a plateauing in seventh and eighth. Okay, here's reading. And reading, the bars you would interpret in a similar way. For reading, we use iReady just in grades 3 through 8. You'll notice a big climb increase in grade 3, kind of moderate growth in 4, 5, and 6. And then by 7 and 8, the growth is starting to plateau, starting to not be so noticeable. Okay, the second question is, how do KSD schools compare with each other in terms of mid-year score, performance, and growth? What we have here is called a scattergram. This is showing reading performance and growth, winter 2018 for grades 3 through 6 in reading. And you'll notice that across the horizontal axis on the bottom, you have performance. What do we mean by performance here? We mean, how do our kids do in terms of a percentile compared to all the kids all over the country that are taking iReady? And I don't have an exact number for that, but it's maybe about 40,000 per grade level. It's a lot of kids. We call this scattergram, sometimes we talk about this in terms of quadrants. So the vertical is the growth. So the growth is also in terms of percentiles compared to kids all over the country who are also doing iReady. So ideally, if you would wave a magic wand, you would want all the kids to be those blue dots who are in quadrant 1. And those schools that you're seeing that are the blue dots are making great gains. They're also high in performance. If we go around counterclockwise, the dark green are the quadrant 2. And these are schools that they started out, they weren't very high in terms of their scores, but they made very good progress. They made much better than average progress in some cases. So that's very commendable. We like seeing kids in quadrant 2. Quadrant 3 for reading, we're not seeing any schools. Quadrant 4 is the light green. And this indicates schools that the kids are high performing, they're doing really well, maybe they're not getting enough challenge because they're not making as much growth. So that's what reading looks like. Now math looks a little bit different. In math we have more of a scattering all through the different quadrants. If you were to look at the scattergram here, the greatest contrast is between the blue dots or the blue schools and the orange schools. The blue schools in math are making great progress. They're scoring very highly. We always love to see kids in quadrant 1. The orange, which is quadrant 3, which is the diagonal across from the blue, you would be a little concerned about those schools because they're not making much progress and they're not doing very well to begin with. So that would be of concern. The dark green just above the orange, again, they started out kind of low, but they're making great gains. We'd be happy, congratulate them. And then the quadrant 4, the light green, those are schools where the kids are, high achievers, doing well. With a little push, maybe they could grow more. So that would be areas where you would want more challenge and maybe more advanced instruction. Okay. So those are the quadrants. And then finally, how do the demographic groups compare in terms of mid-year scores and growth? So we're always concerned about equity. We're concerned about closing gaps. We want all our school students to do well. Some groups are doing better than others. So what does that look like? So we're going to start out here. This graph shows math. These are scale scores. So these are average scores that the kids are getting by group. If you go down the left side, you have the grade level. Then within the grade level, you have the different race ethnicity groups. And each group has a band, a colored band, horizontally, that shows where they are on average in terms of grade level. Because iReady gives you a score that can be interpreted as a grade level placement. So if we start out with the kindergarten kids, they're all not quite at kindergarten, but there's not that much difference among the groups. It's kind of like they're all kind of starting in the same place. By grades 1 and grades 2, you're starting to see that the kids are falling further behind in general, and some groups are lagging behind even more so. Now, one thing that we think of when we look at race ethnicity groups is the size of the group itself. So, for example, your Native Hawaiian and American Indian groups, they're small numbers. There's small numbers of those kids. So statistically, what happens year to year, they're actually different kids. The scores kind of bounce around. If there's one or two kids that are really exceptionally high or exceptionally low, it throws off the averages.
I have a question,
yeah.
just for clarification. On the vertical lines, the GK, G1, G2, is that the goal for what where they should be at mid-year, or
Yes.
is it the end of the year?
Yeah, well, it's kind of both, because iReady gives a score for mid-year that means I've met all the standards and expectations for that grade level at minimum. Now, they also have a rating for the end of the year, which means I've met all the requirements and even exceeded them. But what we want is for kids to be at mid-level. That would be the expectation.
Oh, at the dotted lines?
Yeah, at the dotted line. And if they were at mid-level at the end of the year, that would be fine too.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know it's a little bit different way of looking at our scores, because we usually talk about being, at level or below level or above level. What kind of could be a concern is when you actually see the grade level that the kids are at. So if they're actually 2 or 3 levels below, it might be of concern. For example, Black and Hispanic kids in grade 2 are under grade 1 on the average. That would be a concern. The next slide is the same type of graph, only now we're looking at 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. And big picture, what we're starting to see are the kids kind of being a little bit further and further behind where we want them to be grade-wise, and the gaps to be greater between groups. Anything you wanted to add? So let's look at grade 5, for example. So Black and Hispanic kids at grade 5 are just about at grade 3, so that's like 2 grade levels below. And the white kids are a little bit above grade 4, which isn't that good either, but I mean, it's going in the right direction. And the Asian students are kind of midway between 4 and 5 for grade 5. So what I'm seeing is over grade level, it just looks like there's kind of like slipping further and further behind. Now, admittedly, iReady, like Smarter Balance, is somewhat difficult and demanding assessment. It is on the Common Core, which is still kind of new, but just these are what the results are telling us for right now.
So I have a question. So looking at this, so it looks like none of our students are at grade level.
Well, these are averages.
No, I understand.
Yeah. So,
Except for, I'm wondering about the outlier with the American Indian students.
yeah, that was the case where there were like maybe 4 or 5 students that were just exceptionally gifted. They were just exceptionally good, and that just happened to be the case for that group at that grade level.
And also, with that number of students who are performing much higher than perhaps in other students in their peer group,
Right.
the N size is so small that the number that is increasing, it impacts the larger percentage in a much greater way. So we are seeing that what appears to be an outlier.
Right.
So are we seeing that in grade 6, though? It seems like that's the one that's really standing out.
Right.
Or all grades.
So what we see with grade 6 in math, and we'll see something similar in reading in a second, our grade 6 is a standout, regardless of the ruler we use. So even in Smarter Balance, grade 6 seems to be that grade where things come back into focus. And we've talked about looking into the why. that is. It seems to run atypical to national data and what they say about sixth grade. But our sixth grade, kind of regardless of the ruler, seems to start pushing back in. And it's, again, not where we'd like for them to be, but they're starting to at least pick up a little bit more of that ground in sixth grade. And so even on SBA, we see the same thing where sixth grade starts to pull back up and is a higher scoring grade level for elementary school.
Yeah, and there's a hunch, or it's not even a theory, that our grade 6 students do well because they're still involved in an elementary school, whereas nationwide, most sixth graders are in a middle school. And maybe that's more disruptive to them. We don't really know. And then 7 and 8. And 7 and 8, it looks like, you know, the Black and Hispanic kids are not even at grade 5. They're like maybe at grade 4 level, but none of the groups are well above grade 6. And in grade 8, you see a similar pattern, where the highest groups, the Asian and the white students, are not even at grade 7. Again, these are averages, and you know, some kids are going to be above and some kids are going to be below this. But,
Do we have data to compare to last year's results to see if there's been growth, even from last year to this year?
we could.
At least 3 years. This is our third year,
This is
so
our
we
third
would be
year.
able to make that comparison.
Okay.
You know, historically, for whatever reason, like the state, OSPI, when they look at different grade levels, they do a snapshot. So they'll do the 5th graders this year, the 5th graders next year, and you know, the 6th graders this year, the 6th graders next year. And they're different groups of kids, and doesn't tell you that much. A longitudinal study would be the same kids over time and how they're doing. And that's a more difficult kind of analysis, but it certainly is one that we could do.
Also a comparison to the state, you know, that would be.
So because iReady is district formative, there's not an external comparison other than the national norms that we share, and we look at the percentiles that way. We use iReady in district to do a within-year growth. And so like Andre said, we could absolutely look at year over time. The unique opportunity with iReady is that it gives us 3 points in time to look at a student's movement over the course of the year. So we do our baseline score in September is when the window opens. We do a mid-year that starts in December for middle school and in January for elementary school. And then we do a spring window 3 that will open in March. So we can see that movement, and then they have opportunities to adjust instruction based on scoring and based on domains. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit. And maybe for the sake of time, I'll say that you have handouts that go in more detail with additional student groups. So ELL and Inclusive Ed are included in those packets. But they show similar trends. And so I think the real next question is, well, what do we do with this and what happens?
Do you want to show reading, or reading it's similar?
No, it's gonna. So I think we've gotten to your questions have started to get to well, what do we do with this? And so I want us to end on the focus of why we do formative assessment. And what we do in the takeaway is we notice that our students were more than a year behind. And so typically when we think about growth and we think about performance for our students, we think that they need a year of growth. Gaining those skills for that grade level is success. When we know that our students are more than a grade level behind, we need to expect more than a year's worth of growth. And so working with the SIOs this year, that was a great support and suggestion on their part to push the goals that we set for iReady. Instead of it reflecting 1 year of growth for our students, we pushed it out so the goals were a year and a half worth of growth. And so schools have set goals around the parameters of having a year and a half's worth of growth. No, that won't make up the gap for every student, but that does start pushing the goal further out so that we change the expectation and we change the narrative. It also changes the instructional focus around what growth looks like in our formative assessments. So that was one thing that's happened with that data. We've shared these mid-year results at a school level with our SIOs so they can look at their patterns and trends for the schools that they support. Our schools have always had student level access to this data, and what that gives them that we don't get into in this presentation is the actual domains and standards where students are missing those skills, allowing classroom teachers to then intervene based on those pieces. In addition, schools that have high poverty LAP dollars purchase the add-on of iReady lessons, which gives students tailored instructional time around those standards based on the results of their diagnostic assessments for each. So each diagnostic updates which lessons and which standards they're missing and gives them opportunities to practice those skills. We have an additional cabinet presentation that is extended that gets into some of these details so that we can have a strategic conversation about where there's district need for support, whether it is across student groups or grade levels. So we can think about what that looks like. And then there's still the final opportunity for that restructuring and service before window 3 and then smarter balance. And what I can say, that's the good news story, is that our schools do a good job of redefining the predicted outcome for iReady because they actually provide the instruction, the in-service, and those pieces so that we don't see a duplication of the exact percentages of performance. We go back to those beginning slides where there were 45, 48% proficient. Those are not the SBA scores that we see when we think about that. And that's the exact intent of formative assessment, is that they take that information and then they go in and they provide supports and instruction, and so they can change that narrative when it comes time for the state assessments. So.
Right. Any additional questions?
I had one. So I am guessing that you're already looking at this, but are we seeing any trends by schools? So when we're looking at the averages, do we have certain schools that are outperforming other schools, and how are we utilizing that data to help make improvements district-wide?
So we are aware of schools that are doing that have higher performance over time. And we're communicating that. We communicate that in cabinet. We talk about that in executive cabinet. Some of those schools are already engaged in other activities where they are sharing that knowledge with schools, and so they invite teachers over, not just around iReady specific strategies, but instructional strategies in general. We haven't really expanded that, so it's this collection of schools where we know that now you can go and visit. I know of 2 examples of that specifically, and I don't want to name them, but I am willing to share that with you. But there are small pockets of that. That is not an expanded program that's district-wide.
And then it would be somewhat helpful, and I don't even know if it's possible, on those averages to know how many students are in each one of those groups, because like you said, it could be easily skewed, right? So if you have a group of 10 students compared to a group of 50 students, your averages would be could be impacted by how those students are doing. So I don't know if that's possible to get more of those numbers about how many are in each of those subgroups.
We can definitely get that for you, but we can add that to the presentation, so you have a copy with those updates.
Thank you.
You said that iReady had tailored lessons. Do they have tailored lessons to go above grade level to push those kids who are in that 4th quadrant, who are underperforming, performing well, but not growing as much?
They do go up to at least grade 8 placement level. So if I were a 6th grader who was very advanced in math, let's say, I could have lessons that were 8th grade standards. I'm not sure if they go up to the high school level, but they do adjust to the level of the student.
What about reading?
Reading and math.
Just to 8th grade?
I think it's just to 8th grade. I can check on that and get back to you.
Because I taught high-cap kids, and I had kids who just maxed out at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
5th grade maxed out the 8th grade tests, and where do we go from there without the materials and work, without having teachers having to recreate everything? So I'm just Just curious, I'm always wondering about those high kids.
I can get the answer for you for how far it is.
Oh, no, I already asked mine.
Okay. Director Hardy, any questions?
No questions.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, I had one last question, and I'm just curious about the work we're doing with our clubs, our Hawaiian and Pacific Islander groups. If we can, or if we've attempted to partner with them to provide some after-school tutoring or enrichment activities. And I also wondered about LAP funds, if it's fully covering a lot of that, or are we short on LAP funds, or what can we do to fully get our kids up to speed, beyond the classroom?
So this year, the high poverty LAP dollars were an extension and kind of an additional layer of dollars that schools were added, and they used those as an opportunity to extend the already lessons. And so a lot of those buildings purchased that as an opportunity to have students do that. Now that happens during the school day. That's not an after-school piece that they've added. And as far as I know, we don't have any school programs that are targeting our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students, but I can get back to you on that and what we're doing in that area.
Okay. I know they have a club in Kent Lake that started. It would be good to have some sort of partnership with them.
And extend that as much as we can.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon. Thank you, Dr. Harmon.
Yes. 4.0 board discussion and approval. Our 2018-19 student calendar. I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt the 2018-19 student calendar.
So
Is there a second?
I have a question.
I'll second it. Then you
Okay.
can ask questions.
Okay.
Question, okay.
Now we can go ahead.
So adopting the recommended calendar, which was option 1, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so I had a question, just considering, are there financial implications to starting prior to Labor Day versus after Labor Day with regards to holiday type pay, or are there financial implications that have been considered or discussed around what that might look like for the school year?
So we have not seen that there are any financial implications as far as you're talking about the holidays and whether or not there are more holidays with this type of calendar.
Particular, so if they start before Labor Day, they get paid for that holiday versus, I believe, some don't if they start after Labor Day.
We have always, over the last 4 to 5 years, I believe we've always started over the Labor Day, before the Labor Day holiday. So that's been it's not a new change from previous years.
Two options.
There were
calendar
two
and I
options,
just
yeah.
wondered if there were considerations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that I know of in the actual conversations with our partners, no.
Okay.
In retrospect, we could certainly research to see if there were any
Absolutely.
implications, financial or otherwise.
Question.
where I know, we know as a board, but could you explain a little bit about how the calendar, the process happens?
Certainly. So the most important thing to start with is that the development of the calendar is a mandatory subject of bargaining in the state of Washington. And so the process begins this way. Human Resources puts together 2 drafts just to begin the process. And one is with a full February break, start before Labor Day, and one is with a partial February break, start after Labor Day. And the reason that we include one with a full winter break is that we have an MOU that we've already bargained with KEA that states that the 2 options that we present to them have at least one option with a full winter break. And so that already begins to set the parameters a bit. There are a few other parameters included in that MOU. We then send those 2 options to the KEA, and that is their opportunity to bargain back with us any changes or additional things that they would like us to look at. So, for example, whether or not they want snow days or whether or not they want some additional things. So they look at the winter break and where that fits and different things like that. The district agrees to the changes or asks for or we negotiate back and forth. We may say, well, we could look at that, but we couldn't do this. Again, it's always the case that there's going to be 2 options, one with a full winter break and one without because of the MOU. Once the 2 options are agreed to, both options go to all unions. except the coaches, and that goes through email for a vote, and each union conducts their own calendar vote process. We try to give 3 weeks for the union voting process, and then HR receives all union votes by a certain date, and we prepare that for the board. And so the results of that are here, with the 70% of all of our unions voting for option 1, which is a full winter break starting before the Labor Day.
All right. Okay, if there are no more questions, I'd like to call for a vote to ratify the proposed 2018-19 calendar, option 1. Would anyone like to?
Yeah, we've got the motion already.
Okay,
so just
okay,
the
all
vote.
right. All those in favor of voting, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no. All right, motion passes. Okay, 4.02, resolution number 1534, reduced educational program. I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt resolution number 1534, reduced educational program.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, are there any questions or discussions? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. All right, motion passes. 4.04 is not on my list, but there's a second reading and approval of revised policy 3120 enrollment. 4.03 is missing as well. Okay, pardon me. 4.03 is the second reading and approval of revised policy 3110, qualification of attendance and placement. I'd like to call for a motion.
I so move.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Are there any questions or discussions about 4.03? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Okay, motion passes. 4.04 is the second reading and approval of revised policy 3120 enrollment. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move for approval.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Are there discussions or questions? I have a comment. From anybody? No. Okay. I noticed that there are no procedures for that particular one, and I just didn't know if it was left out or if we have procedures for enrollment.
Thank you, Mr. Heath and Mr. Baylor.
That one does not have a procedure with it, so you didn't see it in the first reading either.
There is no procedures.
No procedure
laid
on
out
that
for that. Okay. There's no reason why, or?
As a model policy.
Well, it says the superintendent shall develop.
So right now we have our policy.
Because we've never had one for that one. There was no need based on all that needed to be said in 3120 was in the policy itself. WASDA also doesn't have a recommended procedure for that one.
All right. I'd like to call for, okay, where are we? Are there any questions or discussions beyond what I asked? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right. 4.04 passes. 4.05, second reading and approval of revised policy 3110, qualifications of attendance and placement. Anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Are there any questions or discussions?
I'm just jumping ahead, sorry. So we're on number,
3131.
okay, yeah, I'm on the next one, okay.
3131.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
No, we're on 4.05 still.
4.05.
Yeah.
On here reads 3131.
Okay, yeah, I think it got
Yeah,
mixed up.
because we just approved 3120.
Yeah. This is different from there. Okay. All right, I'm going to go from there. All right. Okay, 4.06 then. Second reading and approval of revised policy 3140, release of resident students.
Did we approve 4.05 yet? We haven't voted for it. I don't think we voted on 4.05.
Okay, all right, let's go back to 4.05. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say no. Okay, motion passes. Okay, back to 4.06. Anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Move to approve 4.06.
I'll second.
Second, okay. Are there discussions or questions? I do have a question on 4.06, 3140, release of resident students. My question is, I'm wondering about the stipulation there regarding if a student is a child of an employee, that a transfer will be accepted. And I'm just wondering, what is the background of that particular?
You're looking at the procedure.
Yes, it's in the procedure, on page 1 of the procedures. So there's an allowance to transfer. I'm wondering if the transfer is not just out of the district, but also within the district. Because I've seen
So
that.
for employees, according to state law actually stipulates that full-time classified or certificated employees have a right to attend the district in which they teach or work in, and specifically the school or a feeder pattern of that school. I believe the origin of why that is it helps employees get to their job faster and then take care of their own children in the process.
Does it also allow the employee to have their children in a school within the same district that they teach, but in a school that is not their resident school?
That they would have to go through the regular transfer process if they wanted to go outside of their school or their feeder pattern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was not clear in the past, we were allowing that, so I just wanted to clarify.
Right, and that was part of the language of clarifying that.
All right,
Yes, we had
great.
heard that feedback.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, so are there any other questions regarding 4.06? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. All right, motion passes. 4.07, second reading and approval of revised policy 3141, non-resident students. Anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I move to approve 4.07.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussions or questions?
I have one.
All right.
On page 3, in 3.01, what was added is in the sentence, it says, non-resident students will not be permitted to displace resident students in a school prior to October 1st of the current school year. So if there are openings, non-resident students can be there. But what happens if?
Right, but it basically says up until the count day, we can revoke a decision that allowed them to come in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that meant, yeah. And is this the same one? We've got students who are moving out of our district to other schools. I'm not sure, there's so many of these policies right here. I read that they have to renew it every year, and we have the right to say, no, you can't leave the district. You can't go.
In theory, yes. That is not the practice of any district around here. Everybody pretty much, if they're requesting that. And if we were to deny, the appeal process actually goes straight to an administrative court hearing through OSPI. And we would have to have a good reason why we were not releasing.
I'd like to also add that the release doesn't mean that they would be accepted in another district, but it's the first step that they have to do each year. So.
Oh, okay.
Can I also ask about that? I didn't see the issue of if a program is not provided, except for with the exception of online. If, say, a certain curriculum or is not provided in one district versus another, that could be a reason for a transfer, but that's not clearly stated on our reasoning. So I'm wondering if you get a lot of that, where they want some sort of a avionics program or something, special program. Do we make exceptions for that?
Yes, I mean, basically they choose the option such as they feel like their educational, safety, or other need. There's kind of a caveat, right, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so 4.07, any more discussions, questions? Hearing none, I'd like to ask for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. All right, motion passes. 4.08, second reading and approval of revised policy 3416, medication at school. Anyone like to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Approve. All right.
Second.
All right. Are there any questions or discussions? All right, hearing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right, motion passes. We're up to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Do we need to pull the two things that we added, the 1535 and 1536, just for explanation? Or since they were just added?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to do that, yeah.
Okay, 5.03 and 5.04. Okay, anything else? I'd like to ask about 5.06. All right, hearing none, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 5.03, 5.04, and 5.06.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right. First up, 5.03 and 5.04. Would anyone be available to provide an explanation?
Explain why these are on here.
Yes.
So one of the things on this resolution that I provided on your slides that you have in front of you is what we know today. And what we know today, as far as our election results are concerned, is as of 4:15 p.m. this afternoon, our King County election results for Proposition 1 had a 49.77 pass rate. Our King County election results for Proposition 2 had a 49.25% pass rate. Both of these propositions, because they are levies, require a 50% simple majority, which means 50% plus one vote. What we know right now is also that 105 votes separate our yes and no's for Proposition 1, and 323 votes separate our yes and no's on Proposition 2. One of the reasons we're bringing this to the board tonight, which especially when we know that those election results are not certified yet, I wanted to provide you a little bit of background on what some of the timelines that are coming up for us. And so Friday, February 23rd is a really important date that two things happen. One, our election results for the February 13th levy will be certified. That February 23rd is also the last date to pass a resolution to be put on the April ballot. And because those two things are happening on exactly the same day, it offers some complexity for us to do some planning together as we are given our current results with everything we know right now. But I do want to provide one more date, and that date is March 21st. And that date is actually not on the deadline I provided you. March 21st would be the last date that if on February 23rd, either one of these proposition was to pass, we could contact King County Elections and get our proposition pulled off the ballot in time and prior to that April election. So I did want to provide that other date.
So there wouldn't be a cost then
No,
associated?
no, there is no cost.
And we're still running the same amounts on both of them. If we need to run them again, we're not reducing what we need.
Correct.
Okay. Just clarifying that.
All right.
No change.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Decker. All right. And then 5.06, is anyone here to talk about the grant, or if not, I can wait.
We'll get you some additional information.
Okay. I wanted to understand any partnerships with our city of Kent, because we've had, an ongoing relationship with that Clark Lake Park.
Yeah, the Clark Lake, yeah.
And I'm wondering if this is something, it just seems like a great opportunity to work with our city, and they've been looking at projects.
Yeah, definitely.
Public Works.
Yeah, Martin Sardin, as you know, over the last few months, you've seen different grants come through. They're definitely working on STEM. This one is an additional one that they'll be working with. Really, it revolves around problem-based learning, and they actually plan to expand that as part of, if you look at fifth and sixth graders go through, they want to invite those kids back and continue the learning. So this is will add to their ability to do that. So definitely to continue to build that partnership.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'd like to call for a motion to approve 5.03, 5.04, and 5.06.
I so moved.
Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay. If there are no more discussions or questions, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. All right, motion passes. All right. Boy, this is the fastest meeting.
It's Valentine's Day.
All right. 6.01, December 2017 financial statements. Does anyone have any questions or comments? All right. We move to communications from the audience. And doesn't look like I have any cards. So we will move on to our legislative update with, I'm assuming, Mr. Hardy.
Sure.
Give us an update.
There is a presentation attached which details our day on the Hill, and I'll walk through it. It has pictures of who we met with, and I'll kind of walk through. So the day on the Hill, as fun as it wasn't just us. There was actually, it's organized by WASDA. There was over 500 school board directors, including student board representatives, superintendents, business officials. Everybody was there. It was very busy. On Monday the 29th, we went down. So was myself and Karen and Dr. Decker and three great students that you see there. Hopefully, here's Carrington, Caleb, and Blessing. They came down with us for the day. Let me recall who we met with. We met with Representative Pat Sullivan and Senator Joe Fain. You see him there. And then we met with the staff members for Senator Karen Kaiser and Senator Hasagawa, as they were both in sessions. And so that week specifically was an important week. The legislation was in a short session, 60 days only. And so that week specifically, there were several cutoffs for bills that had to get to certain stages or they would not even be considered for the rest of the session. And that's why many of them were there on the floor at that time, both Senator Kaiser and Senator Hasagawa. We got to meet with them. We shared our concerns. We had the students tell their stories. They had amazing stories. We shared the legislative priorities, reiterated that, and then shared how they impact us. There are currently, as I check the update from this week, 4 bills that made it past cutoff that are working on this McCleary fix. So it's the 2242 went through, but there were some fixes that, as one of the WASDA legislative priorities, fix it a little bit, help make sure that there is money at the right level to support. We don't do the local effort assistance, but to support other things that we can be more flexible. They already did pass a capital spending budget, and then we talked additionally about, delinking some of the standards from graduation, as well as priorities, and kind of getting that model set so that we, especially when we look at local levies, can necessarily change that restriction that we have in terms of the total money that we can collect, which is like that $1.50 or $2,500, making sure that gets us the most that we can get when we go out for that. And while not a part of the House or the Senate, we had you can see a couple pictures there, we had a very long and good conversation with Supreme Court Justice Yu, and Justice Gonzalez was also available at that time, talking to us about how they go through things. We went back to the technically secret, non-public room where they make the decisions themselves. It's just the 9 of them, and kind of walked through everything there. I think that was a big hit. Obviously, you can see they got to sit in the chairs themselves. The students did. It was a great time. And then the senators are still hard at work, pushing things through. I think Ways and Means has their cutoff coming up soon, possibly this week or next week, so that certain bills that would actually impact some of the funding bills from 2242 going forward. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Director Hardy. All right, next up is our superintendent's report.
Thank you. Yes, President Vengadaslam, members of the board, Ms. Halley, and staff, community, thank you. I want to first share that most recently I had the opportunity to serve as a consulting superintendent in Education Research and Development Institute, otherwise known as ERDI, at no cost to the district. It was February 4th through the 7th. Approximately 50 superintendents are tasked with providing critical feedback to corporate partners who have services and products that support teaching and learning at various levels in K-12 environment. I take great pride in the fact that these corporate partners want to know from those experts in the field what may work, what pitfalls, what challenges, what advantages can we glean from those superintendents and other leaders in K-12 organizations, again, to provide feedback before some of their products even go to the market. That is, an opportunity that I appreciate our board support. At the same time, I also know that part of not only my professional development opportunities, my consulting opportunities for the industry called K-12 education, also supports my fiscal responsibility. And I do want it to be known, while I did receive an honorarium in the amount of $2,250 for that 4-day piece, 3 days during the work week, I also took 2 days vacation and 1 day furlough. More importantly, to make sure that the information that we provide from Kent School District, some of those products are being used in our district today and being used in some other of the 15,000 districts nationwide. I want to also share about our levy propositions 1 and 2. As Dr. Decker mentioned, I think it is important for us to know, and I want to make sure it is clear that, yes, at last ballot count, we can honestly say we are closer than we've ever been. And certainly at 49.77%, 105 votes and 323 votes for our tech and capital levy, that is significant. And I do want to say, even at this point, with the challenges that are before us and the opportunities that are also in front of us, we are thankful for our voter support so far. And while we have not reached that simple majority passage rate of 50% plus one just yet, again, we are hopeful. At the same time, we will continue to follow our budget recovery plan, which we know is in place. We will reduce costs for the purpose of accelerating the restoration of our fund balance to optimum levels. One, so that, oh, by the way, that we can continue our focus on our core business of teaching and learning, which we've discussed this evening, one example, with an emphasis on learning. And more importantly, that we're never in this situation again with regard to our budget challenges. I also want to finalize my comments by noting that what happens in the news sometimes affects and impacts us more times than others. And any time that there is an act of hatred or violence that occurs in a school, it touches me and certainly should touch us all in a very personal way. This work is meaningful, and I will always say when I have the opportunity to speak in small groups or large groups, that I will contend that schools still and will remain the safest places for our children. When that safety is impacted, just as it was earlier today in Broward County, where a colleague and critical friend of mine who serves as superintendent had the opportunity that I would never wish upon anyone to describe the events and to make sure that students were safe, that the adults who were serving those students were also safe. I want to contend that in his words, that mental health is real, and I trust that the individual who is responsible for those heinous act receives the support that he needs. But I wanted to make sure that that our hearts and minds are with the families of those who were impacted by that event today. That concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Watts. All right. Shall we start this way? Oh, sorry. Director Hardy, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, as you know, I'm traveling, so I appreciate the opportunity to also participate. We, as many of you were there last night, we continue to have our board superintendent governance team, which as a new team, we have two brand new directors and some veteran ones as well, that we're working together as a team of 6 and going forward. And I know personally I'm getting a lot of value out of that for how we can operate and how we can respond to the requests and challenges of our community. And I look forward to more of those throughout the rest of the year.
Thank you. Director Daniel?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple things that I'd love to share. I was fortunate to participate in my first graduation ceremony at KPA last week, and it was fantastic, and nothing more exciting to me than seeing kids be successful, and I'm just so proud. And also, I had the honor of participating on a panel, was it Tuesday or yesterday? Yes. The days go by fast. With Dr. Watts at Mill Creek Middle School for Black History Month. There were 6 of us, and it's always so nice to get back in the buildings and see all the kids. And they were wonderful and had thoughtful questions and just were, it was really a great experience. They were very excited to have us there, probably as excited as we were to be there. And I think as we move forward, I am really excited that schools are participating, because there are some schools who do not and do not recognize that, African American history is a part of American history, and it should be celebrated and acknowledged. And so I appreciate the fact that we are doing that here in Kent. So.
I won't spend too much time on the Olympia trip. I know on the day on the Hill. Debbie was supposed to go, and then at the last minute, she couldn't go, and so she said, I'm so sad that I don't get to go, and so I thought, well, I'll go. And now I'm going to fight you next year. Because it was great. It was so much fun watching the kids in action and talking with them at lunch. They had some really good ideas about what we can do to enhance our school system, so it was very impressive. Attended the race and equity convening. Ross was there and Denise was there. And that's always great, and Brad, our star, always is the facilitator. I attended the Kent Lake girls basketball game versus Curtis last Thursday night. And I'm not a basketball person. I know what a rebound is, and I know what a three-point shot is, and just watching our girls, they were so good. They were so much better than Curtis. They were great at defense. They were great at rebounding and great at the three-pointers. So that's what I know about basketball. But it was like 59-36, the score was. So, and I don't know how they did on Saturday, but I was very impressed with them. Plus, they have a cumulative grade point average of 3.51, so there are scholar athletes as well. And I was at KPA graduation, always loved the KPA graduations. Just touching on what Dr. Watts was talking about, I'm always pleased to see that we're increasing our safety and security measures in our schools. We've spent millions of dollars on that, and I always push to make sure we do our lockdown drills early in the year and practice them a couple times a year so that the kids know what to do. I mean, you have to have a fire drill once a month. You should be having lockdown drills almost the same amount, just so that they know what to do, so it's automatic. Last thing I want to mention is that the Communities and Schools annual fundraising breakfast is May 3rd at KPA. We do our mentoring through Communities and Schools, and they're working with McKinney-Vento kids, gotten a grant, 2-year grant, and so we've expanded that work, and they're helping families find homes, and it's tough work, but it's really needed. So, and we're working on sustainability. How are we going to sustain that after the 2-year grant is over? So anyway, breakfast is on May 3rd, and we're looking to exceed our $53,000 mark from last year. So you're all invited.
Okay. So yeah, the KPA graduation, I had the honor to speak on behalf of the district this time, and it was the largest graduating class that I believe they've had. They had 22 students that actually graduated for winter, and 19 actually walked that night, which was very, very cool to be able to see that. So they were very excited. They got to hold it in the gym instead of the library. So traditionally winter's been in the library, and so it was wonderful to see all the family and support there for those. I did happen to see an email from Joe Fain that came out that they're holding a town hall meeting this Saturday at, I believe, Golden Stair, 11 a.m. So it was kind of late notice, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that they're speaking about education funding.
Is it just Joe, or is he bringing?
I think it's Joe and Pat and
Mark?
Mark. So there's 3. So, so that event is happening. And I will always put in a plug for mentoring. I know that, so if you're not already a mentor, or even when you talk to people, please encourage them. I know I had an opportunity to see the young man that I mentor, and I hadn't seen him for a week. And when and he's like, "You came back," and I'm like, "Well, yes, of course I did." And so then it was like, so when do you come again? And so, even though sometimes it doesn't seem, he's a 3rd grader and it doesn't seem like we're doing anything really great, I know that he looks forward to that time. And my dad is also mentoring up in a different district, and he called me the other day. He was so excited. He goes, "I got a Valentine's Day card signed by everybody in the class." And so it's a great opportunity for some of our citizens that may be retired and have opportunities to be in those classrooms, and I know the students appreciate that. So I will end with that.
Thank you. All right. Well, I really pride myself in having attended every single meeting in my 4 years of elected office, and so I'm really sad to hear about graduation missing. You know, that's the first time I missed graduation, and first time in January I've missed a board meeting. So I've missed quite a bit, and I'm happy to be back, and I want to thank all of you for just carrying on, and all the work everybody's done for the levy. Whatever happens, it is just a tremendous effort, and I'm sorry that I was not able to help out. But I was with you in spirit, and here's hoping that tomorrow's numbers are better. I remain positive. I would also like to just mention that even though I wasn't here present physically, I've been on email quite a bit, and I am working with Washington First and the Kent Schools Foundation, and kind of collaborating along with communities and schools of Kent to try and figure out how we can have our all of our schools, middle schools and elementary schools, have first Lego teams or first tech teams, and robotics, and also how do we leverage our foundation money, because regardless of how the levy goes, I think we're going to have those partnerships in place to kind of add those enrichment programs. And so I hope we can all kind of put our heads together and really figure this out, because I think we're going to need a lot of support, from our community. And I'm hopeful that our foundation can grow to something really of substance, and leverage some of the funding that's out there for our kids. So anyway, that's just, we'll see how all of this works out, but I'm hopeful for tomorrow, and I thank you all so much for coming tonight. Okay, have a good night.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes.
And so if we have classified starting, right.